Tonight, a bombshell report that could light the fuse under Bob Mueller. Rod Rosenstein, Mueller's gatekeeper, reportedly talked of personally recording his conversations with President Trump and of possibly recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment, the one saying the president unfit for office and getting Donald Trump out of the White House. How will the president respond, and could this provide the president with the ammunition to drop Rosenstein and even Robert Mueller? Then, the fallout from the bombshell allegations against Trump's Supreme Court nominee. Negotiations continue as we speak between Christine Blasey Ford and the Senate Judiciary Committee. We've got the very latest, plus reaction from Congresswoman Kathleen Rice and former Congresswoman Liz Holtzman, both with powerful words in our panel. And later, the judge who sent former top Cuomo aide Joe Percoco to prison for 6 years says she hopes Albany is listening, but will they get her message? Good evening and welcome to RFL on this very busy new Friday. I am Richard French, and we will get to the very latest on the High Court shutdown in just a moment. But what I thought my lead takes a back seat, because we begin with the very latest bombshell to hit the Trump administration. And no one knows, frankly, where or how this one will end. In a jaw-dropping report from the New York Times, and since confirmed by other outlets, Rosenstein reportedly talked last year of personally recording conversations with the president and of recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove President Trump from office. Now, since the report dropped, we've gotten a denial from Rosenstein and nothing, which is interesting, from this White House.
Sources familiar with the memos of former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe confirmed that according to memos allegedly written by McCabe, that during a conversation in May of 2017 between him and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Rosenstein suggested McCabe or others wear a wire when speaking with Donald Trump. First reported in the New York Times, Rosenstein also allegedly discussed recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Mr. Trump from office for being unfit. Times says that Mr. Rosenstein made these suggestions in the spring of 17 after the president's firing of FBI Director James Comey sent the White House into turmoil. Mr. Rosenstein was just 2 weeks into his job at the time. Rosenstein wrote a memo critical of Comey's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation, but he felt blindsided and used by the president, who said he fired Comey based on Rosenstein's recommendation. In a statement, Rosenstein strongly denied the Times reporting, saying, "The New York Times story is inaccurate and factually incorrect," adding, "Based on my personal dealings with the president, there is no basis to invoke the 25th Amendment."
And as additional color, reportedly, different people that were privy to the conversations when Mr. Rosenstein said it said, one that he said it in jest and he was kidding, another one that they believed he was serious when he made those conversations public. All right, now let's bring in once again Roland Riopel. Roland, former federal prosecutor, now an attorney in private practice, our go-to guy in all things as it relates to the Mueller probe. And wow, Roland, as you said before. So let's first of all go to some of the motivations, I believe, and then possibly the dominoes that could fall. I see no other possible rationale for this coming out at this time unless it was someone sympathetic, frankly, to the president who wanted this information out as a justification for a Saturday Massacre 2.0.
I agree with you completely, Richard. I think what happened here is when the president declassified the materials relating to the Mueller investigation, it became clear to a Trump ally inside the Department of Justice that he or she could leak this information with impunity. And I think it is likely that this was leaked with the knowledge and desire of the White House to give the president the pretext he needs now to fire Rosenstein and put in someone sympathetic to him in Rosenstein's place to supervise Mueller and ultimately muzzle Mueller and shut Mueller down.
Before we
So
get
I
to that
think
one, Roland,
that may be what's happening.
Right,
Yeah.
and before we get to, when I want to go sequentially, some of the different ways this could play out, let's step back for a second and say, wait a minute. If my Deputy Attorney General, basically given the recusal of Sessions, the guy running the probe, is talking about invoking the 25th and recruiting fellow cabinet members to get in on this and wear a wire like you would to a mafia don or a drug kingpin, wouldn't the president be justified in saying, this guy's out of here?
If this happened and Rosenstein meant it, I think the president will have the cover he needs to say, how can you expect me to work with this
And
guy?
Roland, to that point,
work with him.
This apparently was in notes from McCabe. So I guess my other question is, if McCabe thought it was a joke, why would he keep notes that apparently were part of what was declassified and now brought to light?
I think that's right, Richard. Why would he write this down without noting that it was said in jest unless it was serious? And if it was serious, what kind of president do you have to have the number 2 person at the Department of Justice to seriously consider trying to wire up people to get you on tape?
And who believed, rightly or wrongly, that he had the chief of staff potentially, as well as the attorney general, who would agree with him that they've reached the threshold for the 25th. I could also point out the bizarre nature that somehow we sit here tonight, Roland, at 6-something at night on a Friday, and the New York Times, which I'm told by my president is the failing Times that can't be trusted because of anonymous sources, I have a feeling that he's going to base the Times reporting with anonymous sources as the rationale to now remove Rosenstein. But again, I digress into this bizarro world that we're in. Okay, so let's go down the road that you and I think that will go down. Rosenstein, it's when, not if, he gets pushed. Now, first of all, who would do the firing in that scenario? Would the president do it? Would he have Sessions do it? And if Sessions refused, does Sessions walk the plank? How would the mechanics work?
I think the president would order Sessions to fire Rosenstein. If Sessions refused, the president would fire Sessions, and then the president would fire Rosenstein himself. I think Rosenstein is bound to go sooner or later with this report, and the president will ultimately be the person pulling the trigger either directly or through Sessions.
So now we go into the domino game. So let's go through the sequentially, and we do have a little bit of a guide of sorts when we go back to what happened with Watergate, and more specifically, as we all know, with the Saturday Night Massacre. So if you go down the food chain and with the recusals of Sessions, you then would go down, as I understand, and correct me if I get this wrong, to the Assistant Attorney General. The problem is, we have no confirmed person in that position, with the predecessor leaving to go, I think, represent Walmart. So then you'd go to the Solicitor General. But as we know, and you know this person's name better than I do, he's not thought of as a hack either. Would this have to go to the president getting confirmation from whoever would be appointed to this that he or she would in fact remove Mueller? Would he secure that promise before he'd put them in a position?
I think, given what appears to be a conspiracy between the president and people high up at the Justice Department, my guess is he does have someone who he has had a conversation with and who has agreed that he or she will fire Rosenstein if necessary. I think the president will know that before he begins this domino effect. And remember, back in the old days of the Saturday Night Massacre, the view inside the Justice Department was that the firing of the special counsel should come from somebody inside the Justice Department, not from the president directly. So that may be playing out now.
Okay, so then, Roland, let's say the musical chairs play out and they find somebody who's willing to carry out the order. What happens to the Mueller probe? And do this with me as much as you can from where the Mueller probe is right now, if the new person decided to shut it down, and what happens as best you can, both in terms of how it could continue, the role of the Senate. Walk us through what could happen next.
Gosh, there's so many ways this could play out, Richard, depending on where the Mueller probe is and what the status of the Mueller probe is, and given the great secrecy that surrounds the Mueller probe, it's hard to know the answer to that. It's just possible that Mueller has already indicted a bunch of people, and those indictments are under seal. That could be true. If that's true, then I think those indictments become unsealed, and those cases proceed with somebody else acting to prosecute them. It is possible that Mueller, in the old Saturday Night Massacre scenario, the counsel to the Watergate special prosecutor had specific plans to take their evidence, protect it, and deliver it to others who might be able to use it. I think something like that scenario was probably set up by Mueller. There may be attorneys general at the various states that are ready to act on evidence they have and the evidence that they'll receive from Mueller if he's terminated. That's another possibility.
In all likelihood, though, there doesn't seem to be a scenario, you believe, where this report will never see the light of day. In the end, you can remove the folks you want, you can do for whatever motivations the president has, some of which I think are obvious, but if he tries to make it all go away at the end, whether it be at the state AGs that have been empowered through the probe here and also the report itself, somehow this will see the light of day.
I think that's right, Richard, because even if Mr. Trump is able to cut everything off at the root now, I do think, at least I hope, I have faith in the American public, that they will elect a Democratic Congress. And that Congress will then have the subpoena power, and it will be able to subpoena Mr. Mueller, find out what he knows from his files and what he can remember, and they can subpoena those files. I have the feeling that this will all come out one way or another, and we are so far down the road with the investigation, I think it is too late really to cut it off.
They're telling me I got 30 seconds, but Roland, do you think we're heading for a constitutional crisis?
I do, because I do think Mueller will either be muzzled or fired, or perhaps both in sequence, and then it will be up to the Congress to take up the investigation and follow it through. And I think that the Congress will not do that in its present incarnation. And that's a constitutional crisis, because they will not be doing their duty.
And that is a very sad testament to where we are. Roland, as always, thank you for making time for me on short notice. I so appreciate it.
Great pleasure, Richard. I'm sorry I didn't have my tie on.
Forgiven. All right. When we come back to the story, I thought we'd lead with the latest on the standoff over Brett Kavanaugh and that key position on the Supreme Court. Will his accuser testify before Congress? We'll get the very latest. Stay with us.